The most important thing I found from Sandy anyway was call logs from both highway and other public safety agencies, but certainly photographs are good documentation as well. We had the opinion that any photograph, a digital photograph with a GIS tag on it would be very helpful as well. And also a picture of the tree through the roof of the town hall for the insurance agency would probably be a good idea, because they'll probably take the tree down as quickly as you can, and they'll need to know that it was actually there, and that it wasn't just a stray shot from a trebuchet or something that hit the town hall.
Precise pictures. We had issues with project worksheets later on in the process dealing with road drainage, and we were very much able to support that there was drainage in the roads, because we had pictures where the drainage was all curled up and snaked up and lying next to the roads, and we were able to say, no, see, it was there, because now it's gone. You've cleaned that all up and it's gone, and we went for the project worksheet scope of the work. They're only going to reimburse you based on what actually needed to be repaired, and when we said, look, we filled it in, but we need to put the drainage back, we ended up having to establish that the drainage had been there, and we had pictures. So I would say, if you haven't armed your highway superintendent with a camera, it's a very good idea, because when they're out on the scene to respond to something, he snapped pictures of everything, and we have them in every one of those files, and they're very, very useful later.
Well, we also have, and just in regard to the GPS too, with your EMPG grants, there are handheld units, which a lot of communities are buying now, and they're about $400 to $500 each, but they'll allow you to get the coordinates for, and they're good for a number of different things, both response, so out in the woods you can find things and that type of thing, but also for recovery. They're huge for debris, in terms of verifying where debris fields are, the length and width and everything else of debris fields, so you can determine volume. They also come with cameras in them, so you can take pictures of hangars and that type of thing. And as you know, when FEMA comes around, that's the kind of information they're looking for. By far and away, the biggest portion of FEMA reimbursement, I think, was debris during the 4 events. So they're hugely effective in helping you document that. And again, you can purchase those through the EMPG grants. They're on the list. And a lot of communities have already done so. I think also there's a training program that the Western Regional Homeland Security Council is sponsoring, but it's going to be in Franklin County, correct? Specifically on these units. I would encourage the cities and towns to send people. They're going to rent some units, I think, for the purpose of the training. But if you'd like to purchase them, your next round of EMPG funding, it might be a good idea to send somebody to this training and then purchase some of these. I really think they're a good device for the towns.
It's my understanding that it's not only the on-the-ground work, but also the administrative work that can be reimbursed. So the time that it takes to do the paperwork, the time that your folks take to track what the expenses are, all of that needs to be tracked so that it can be reimbursed as well.
I put down the time it actually took us to do the paperwork, and in both cases it got reduced by FEMA as being too high.
What? Within Buckland, what we've done is we have the Shelburne Falls Area Business Association. We, as a standard protocol, have actually brought the executive director into our disaster emergency management planning team. So she's at the table when we have these conversations, and she's our liaison between emergency response and to the business community. So, and she's also being incorporated into things like this. She was invited today, she couldn't come. So we've been incorporating her into our emergency preparation planning. She was a central part in communicating what was happening on the ground in our meetings back out to the business community, as well as bringing their concerns and issues back to the select board and the EOC folks in terms of managing some things that we might not know about on the ground. So that was really very helpful. How do you request state and federal aid? MEMA. And then FEMA. And so Is there anything else from anybody?
I think it's really important that people don't forget the Natural Resource and Conservation Service. They actually respond much better than FEMA because they can go out in the field and immediately say if a project is available. They can work with private landowners and as well as public, and they can assess it, put it out to bid for you, engineer it, put it out to bid, and install it. And it can be done. And I think Buckland is a perfect example. From Irene damage, there were searching projects in the county that were installed, assessed, bid out, done, and completely done by end of February, beginning of March. And you're on your 8th, January, and you're on your 8th FEMA team now.
We just got our 8th project specialist 2 days ago.
Right. This is from August 2011.
Yeah, I know. Well, the Conservation District in Franklin County, you can just call NRCS, and Rita Thibodeau lives in Coleraine, so she, will be out in the field immediately, and the state engineer is right in Amherst, so they can be immediately, and it's just, because the key thing is you do not need a declared event. That's huge in our favor because if the event might not be large enough, it could be contained just to a couple towns or whatever. So you do not need a declared event for NRCS, and they can come out and immediately, you need them to assess it before you do anything. Because once you touch it, it's no longer imminent danger or a threat, and so therefore you're not eligible for their emergency watershed protection money. So it's critical. The other thing I just want to bring up is that nobody claims the debris in the river. And we have like 60 miles of debris sitting in the river still.
Should towns have a stash of money set aside to respond to emergencies? And is it really necessary? Now, so we got some different opinions here, and I don't know if I have the answer, but I think it's something that towns may want to think about, and certainly what we would advocate for at the RPC is to have either, some accounts that you can use, even if you don't have to declare a state of emergency per se, that you might be able to access funds that you set aside, or even having stabilization money that you set aside, so you have some cash to use. And then I would certainly, based on our discussion with Bill, is call DOR because he's practiced a couple times about this process and can tell you exactly how to get the money and if you need the money, and maybe you even don't need accounts set aside, but so you may not have to go through that state, but it's something that towns should be thinking about as far as it's nice to have that a little bit of a nest egg for emergency management. You put it aside for your capital improvements and other things, but do you have that set aside for emergency management?
Budgets, at a town meeting, for the hurricane that's going to happen 6 months down the road. So when that happens, first of all, the town does have to declare a state of emergency. Once they've done that, they can write into the director's accounts for permission to deficit spend under Chapter 44, Section 31 of the Mass General Laws that allows town officials to spend without appropriation. But that works best when there's actually sufficient funds in the stabilization fund, or there's funds available that you can draw down. What we saw between the tornado and the hurricane and the snowstorm was a lot of towns did not have those reserves. So basically they did have to turn around and do some short-term borrowing. So they did have to write in, certainly for the operations end, they had to write in, to request permission to borrow to cover the operations costs. You have to think about how you're going to fund these costs, both in the short run and in the long run.
It's been recommended at these sessions that the towns have it, and it's not just having the money available, it's also going through the procurement process from the administration point of view. And having those contracts in place can take that entire worry off the table. And you'll also be first on the list for getting supplies and services if you do have those available. So I'm trying to get that done in Northfield, and I am glad to hear that at least another town has it.
Learning those 3 steps, the emergency spending versus the then sort of borrowing because you've emergency spent, and then the final piece, because that's also taken into account. You're not getting 100% back. So I can tell you firsthand that we know we will be borrowing, we've done all three. We had to vote to deficit spend, we had to twice write into DOR for temporary spending, and we've also gone to town meeting and to bond council for that piece of it. And we know we will be rolling into probably maybe even up to $1 million in permanent borrowing based on the money that's left after everything clears the dust. We're hoping to be just under $1 million. So
And the aftermath of Irene was actually having a meeting with our citizens, which seems like a no-brainer, but actually people who didn't have the means to hear our reverse 911 calls, didn't have television because they didn't have electricity and weren't getting it for a while, actually having a meeting with residents and citizens to be able to answer questions and give updates on what's going on, helped to inform them when we needed to go to do borrowing and that sort of thing, just in terms of apprising them of the situation. The other thing that happened during annual town meeting when it came to budget time, of financing all these sorts of things, that information also went into our, not only our annual town report, but also our memo to the citizens in terms of the budget sheet that was given to them during town meeting. And I think that they found that to be very helpful as well, just in terms of a status update on what was going on, how much things were going to cost, and sort of what the timeline was of what they could expect in terms of repairs, and when were we actually going to get to their street. So it makes a really big difference, and I think while through this whole exercise we've been talking about communicating with the public, I think communicating with the public also is about managing expectations. Not just giving information, but also managing their expectations and giving them information so that they're able to figure out how they're going to manage their own little personal disaster in the face of all of our big disasters and trying to deal with whatever's happening to us as a community.
Everyone said, I think that the people in this room, we've seen each other a lot, and I don't know how we can do this, but we need to get more town officials involved. The answer to your question earlier about who's in charge, you can have all the NIMS rules, you can have all the other rules, it's who's in the room at the time. Are they willing to play by the rules? If you have an ego that's in the way, that's something you're going to have to get through in your POC at the time. The more that we can get in here working with each other now, the less of them have the egos when they walk into that room. And as a select board member, for me, it's really easy to hand it off to my emergency management director because I know I can trust and rely on what he's saying to me. And we know we can work together as a team. So, and I know I've got people in other towns I can contact.
The truth, it really doesn't matter what the scenario is. Anytime that we have an opportunity to be together and to have as much mix as possible, I think it's very helpful because the people that are here today are the ones that we can rely on in an emergency, and it's just hard to interact with people on a regular, everyday basis. So when you have these opportunities, it's very, very helpful, I think.
Great.
I said earlier, I coordinate the volunteers that are trained to respond to disasters. One of the things I heard from some of the tables is how do we get our locals involved. I'm willing to come out and talk about that. The other thing we have that we can offer is a training, personal family training for preparedness. And I will go into any group. I go into churches, I'll go into any kind of Lions Club or any of that, or you can get a group of people together. Sometimes getting your first responders' families trained is a good thing too. So if you want those kinds of exercise or trainings in your towns, just give me a call and I'd be glad to arrange that.
The thing I would say, just in terms of people coming to this, it would be really helpful to have the utilities come to meetings like this to hear what some of our issues.
I think we should take it seriously when MEMA announces a strategic reassessment. I think they really mean that they're going to open up a lot of policies for new thoughts and new ideas. And if he responded to my suggestion, he might respond to other suggestions. And of course, there's a series of meetings scheduled within the next 2 or 3 weeks. which EMDs are invited to, and probably, Bob, I assume we could take other, if there was another town official who's not an EMD, we could bring that official along. And the fact that he was willing to respond that quickly means, I think, that they are really open to other suggestions.
Concerning what went on here. Also, Patrick talks directly with the director weekly. So what he sees when he sees the goings on here get reported upstream. And to Chris's point, that's exactly what happened with your issue, Chris, is that went from Pat to the director. So it does happen. We're an imperfect agency, but we're getting better. And I think we've gotten better over time. Just like everybody else, the 4 declarations have helped us too.
Maybe the 100, 700 level course. DOR does a new official finance every time there's been an election. So maybe every summer, you need to run that 100, 700 for new officials and gear it towards those people. Maybe it isn't the 100, 700, maybe it's actually a slightly different course because maybe we want them to know something beyond that. The 100, 700 runs through so much that I'm not sure they would take it all away with them. You know, you want it to be a little more practical, but maybe it's an annual thing we need to do after town elections so that towns can send their new select board.
Because even if they chose not to send it, the new member of the board would know that they're required to take it.
Right, and it could be for more than select board members. You may
Right.
want to send your new board of
Accountants.
health
Right.
member, you may want to send your new, any new elected or appointed officials that are, it's pertinent to, if you ran it every summer, just like the DOR finance, people kind of look for it, they know it's coming.